Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today from the wilds of Louisiana, and he's above water for 2 days in a row, Rob Morse of Self-Defense Gun Stories and the Slow Facts blog. Rob, thanks for coming in and sitting in today, man.
Paul, I appreciate that you're letting me back on your show, but I have to, in full disclosure, all your better options ran off the SHOT Show, and you and I are left doing what we can. Yeah,
well, and Tom Knighton brought this up yesterday. We're taking one for the team. Everybody's at SHOT Show. Somebody has to stay behind, report the news. Here we are. So I want to remind everybody as we get started, if you're watching on the Polite Society Facebook, YouTube, or Facebook pages, you can comment on those live videos. We'll get those right away. If you're watching anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet, and we'll get those just as fast. We'll get them on the air as long as you're talking about what we're talking about. We'll get them on the air and we'll discuss them. Excuse me. Rob, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to talk about is there was yesterday on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the federal holiday. Biden went to go speak at a gathering for Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Washington, D.C. I grabbed some of his comments. I want to play them, and then we'll talk about them. So I'm going to put those up and hang on, folks. We'll be right back. I may not even let Biden finish before I start ripping him. Hang on.
After Buffalo and Uvalde, and I visited both, I signed the first major gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years. And I'll say what I said then, I'll say it over and over again. I am going to get assault weapons banned.
I've got to stop it right there, and I'm going to say, Mr. President, in your wet dreams, it's not going to happen. There is no way it's going through the House, and the new House is there. There's no way it's going through the House. We will not get an assault weapons ban for at least the next 2 years.
Paul, maybe he doesn't intend to follow the law. You can get the ATF to say, we won't approve any, sue us, take us to court. By the way, we'll ignore comments. I tell you what, it'll be 4 to 5 years from now when the Supreme Court finally rules on it. Maybe that's the new Democratic playbook. Invent your own laws and demand that citizens take back their freedoms. Maybe that's the way he went. Paul, were you going to play the rest of that clip? Because
yes.
There's a part I'd
yes.
like to.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me get that one in.
After Buffalo and Uvalde, and I visited both, I signed the first major gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years. And I'll say what I said then, I'll say it over and over again. I am going to get assault weapons banned. I did it once, I'm going to do it again. There's no social redeeming value. Deer aren't wearing Kevlar vests out there. What the hell you need an assault? No, I'm serious. And ban the number of bullets that can go in a magazine.
Okay, I got to get in on this one. Deer aren't wearing Kevlar vests. That's not what the Second Amendment is for hunting deer. And all right, let me go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
There's no need for any of that. I love my right-wing friends who talk about the tree of liberty is water with the blood of patriots.
Again, I gotta stop there. You're forgetting a part there. It's the blood of tyrants and patriots. You're forgetting the tyrants part, or are you just intentionally leaving that out? Are you worried that we think you're a tyrant?
Who's had a stroke to remember things correctly. he can't remember where he's been and what schools he's attended, Paul. So we're picking on the handicapped. Now, the fact that some Democrats elected a handicapped man to the office, that's on them.
I've had a stroke, dude. I had a stroke. I don't know that his may have been more severe than mine, but boy, I can still reason. I can still think. I can still. Anyway, there's more. There's more to this. Let's.
If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it. Think about the rationale for this. It's about money.
Okay, I got to stop there again. We're almost done with his remarks, but not quite. I've never heard of an AR-15.
Yeah. We've got a senator from Pennsylvania and a president who can't speak because they've suffered brain damage. Let's say we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He meant to say AR-15.
Yep.
And he's calling it now a military assault weapon. Okay, again, it's not. It's a different firearm. But okay, so you start first, Mr. President. Disarm the police. And disarm those around you who are armed with semi-automatic weapons. We'll follow your lead.
Yes.
Sadly, the more Joe Biden speaks, the better we look. What he said for us is that the 23,000 firearms regulations failed. I think he's right. He also said that modern sporting rifles, which were actually had about 200 people killed with long guns of any kind last year. Remember, we had more people killed with hammers and clubs and fists and feet last year. I would also remind the president they didn't need F-15s in Vietnam or in Afghanistan to defeat the United States. Militarily, we can defeat you politically, Mr. President, with far, far less. Again, because he's had a stroke, maybe President Joseph Biden doesn't remember Vietnam or Afghanistan.
And I want to know how many F-15s that Ukraine has.
Good point.
Because I don't think they have a single one. And they're taking on Russia, which is supposedly the world's #2 military power. We got a little bit left to go with Biden's remarks, but we're almost done. Let me go ahead and get back to those.
Money, money, money. Meanwhile, we're making historic investments in community violence interventions. Studies have shown that reduced violent crime up to 60%. We've seen this kind of impact in Baltimore and Sacramento.
All right, that's the end of what I've got there. Baltimore and Sacramento, two of the safest cities in the United States, right, Rob?
Oh, gosh, Paul, no, please. And I do have to remember the gun violence interventionist who was being paid by the city of Chicago last week was arrested with, now he's a convicted felon who was supposed to be a liaison with the gangs. He was arrested for having numerous firearms that are illegal for him to own, drugs, which are illegal for him to deal, and $50,000 in drug cash, which he didn't earn that. You know, I bet he got some of that money the same way Nancy Pelosi did, because she sure didn't earn it off her income as a congresswoman.
No, she
but
did not.
Let's look at what President Biden said. He said, there's no justification for long guns in the United States. We're talking about approximately 200,000 people who defend themselves with a long gun every year.
Compared to 200 that are killed with them.
Are murdered by them.
Yeah.
A 250,000 people, when I look at that for lives saved, Mr. President, that's a lot of assault, rape, robbery, and murder that was stopped. We did that because your police and judicial system failed to put and keep violent criminals in jail. You threw open the borders to let drug gangs roam our country at will. We'll take care of it, Mr. President. Get out of our way.
Let's get to some, because we've got just oodles and oodles of comments. I'm not going to be able to get to them all, but let's get to a few of them. Whoops, that's the wrong button. That's the right one. John over on the Facebook side says, never trust a government that doesn't trust its own citizens with guns, Benjamin Franklin. And then Michael, also on the Facebook side, says he wants to ban just about everything, including 9mm. Yeah, the lung blower outers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's be fair. He is an honest shill. Bloomberg gave the Democrats $100 million. He's delivering the gun control that he was paid to deliver.
Yeah, Shelley says the ship for illegal, insert sarcasm, assault weapons ban has sailed, but he might create one anyway, and that goes right to your point, Rob. Well, let's see, we got a lot more here. Gerald Dees, and we're getting... So Facebook is extremely active today. Gerald says, I don't even watch his speeches until they're deduped in Newsmax.
There you go.
Michael, when I said about the tyrants point I made, he can't say tyrants due to professional courtesy.
Ooh.
All right. And going back to Michael, no brain damage. It's mostly lies.
Okay, it's inarticulate lies. Can we compromise there, Michael?
Roderick has a great point. The 1994 crime bill banned bayonet lugs, flash suppressors, and magazines with over 10 rounds with newly manufactured rifles. It cleared out many previously made AR-15s that normally would not have sold. 1994, I was not really in the gun culture. I do remember when that went through, and I know the price of pre-1994 magazines went through the roof and stayed there until 2004, when it was sunsetted.
What's fascinating now is we're seeing this ping pong where politicians make infringements on the Second Amendment as they used to. And now courts are going, oh, sorry, that's unconstitutional. It's happening at the lower court level. And it's happening in sometimes a matter of days to weeks after these laws are passed. Then this venue shopping takes place to go, okay, which circuit court judge can I get to rule that this law is, if not constitutional, should at least stand until the court case is settled years, if not 5 years from now. And some judges aren't having it. We are oddly blessed with politicians who won't leave well enough alone. They throw so many infringements into a bill that wise strategists take them piece at a time. Oh, this is unconstitutional, this aspect, this aspect, this aspect, this aspect. So the bills over and over are condemned by appeals court judges. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said, at least in the Second Circuit, you can't take pages of criticism of a bill and use 4 sentences to say, yes, we'll give precedence to legislative intent and then settle this in court years from now and claim that there is no harm done.
Yeah. Let me get a couple more comments in here quick. Gerald says $120 for a Glock 17 mag at one point during the assault weapon ban.
Wow, Gerald.
Yeah. And then John reminded us that Biden said no constitution. No constitutional amendment is absolute. I beg to differ. I very much beg to differ. One more, and then we'll move on to our next story.
Well, listen to what Joe is doing. In those speeches, Joe is hitting talking points. So he's playing to his audience. Half of new voters declare themselves as independent. They're not his audience. They're in play. Paul, thank you for being on every day and giving them the facts that Joe Biden won't.
Yeah. Michael, and I love this idea. Penalties need to be imposed on states and politicians who don't obey rulings. That's a point that you and I have often gone over, and I've gone over with others as well, as that there is really no penalty for politicians to pass unconstitutional laws.
Right.
So,
with a slight correction that when it's an established law, then we can say, this wasn't just a mistake. You violated our civil rights. You do now owe penalties for that, which makes it easier to get court costs. But there are no personal penalties. You're right, absolutely. Although there are, Florida has that law. I'm trying to remember who else does. That if local politicians infringed on an individual's right to keep and bear, they were individually liable.
I think Florida is the only one that has that, and I don't think they've used it. They've threatened it, which is usually...
Yeah, right. Isn't that interesting? Yes.
Just the threat of you're going to be paying for this personally if you don't knock it off has brought several local politicians into line. So,
do we want to go to Kentucky?
Let's.
Or do you have more comments?
We do, but we need to. We're already 17 minutes into the show. Next, I have in my show notes up here is Virginia.
Oh.
Okay,
let's go there.
All right. Gun rights advocates are pushing back against Virginia legislation that would require people to wait several days before being allowed to purchase a gun. The bill would force buyers to wait 3 days after they complete the written consent form to have a licensed dealer obtain a criminal history record information. The group and gun rights opponents rallied Monday at the Virginia Capitol during lobby day. It totally passed over me that it was Virginia Lobby Day. They quoted Philip Van Cleve here. It doesn't help. California has a 10-day waiting period, and every time you turn around, there's a major crime going on out there. Philip Van Cleve nailed it. And California isn't the only place, but it doesn't do a darn bit of good because the bad guys get their guns off the street. They don't have a waiting period.
California is the leading state for gun control. They have all the measures that should stop mass public violence, and yet they lead the nation in mass public armed violence. To me, that says they failed. The Senate in Virginia is still in Democrat hands. They're up for re-election in 2023. They have off-year elections. What's amazing is we've had court cases that said, wait a minute, young men and women are due the Second Amendment rights. You can't say, oh gosh, I know you can get married and join the military and you can be a commercial pilot, you can be a commercial truck driver, but you can't defend yourself or your family if you go to the local convenience store after dinner. Wow. How abusive.
C&T Designs and Arms says we have all the data we need that shows waiting periods have never worked and they never will work. I remember a statistic, this has been several months ago, but I remember a statistic that came out. The average time between gun purchase and being used in a crime was 11
years. Right. Well, and now what's fascinating, and I was in California when somebody first brought this to my attention. Suppose you have several guns. Okay, you go to get another one. We don't want you to have a gun because you may make an impulsive act and injure yourself or someone else. That I wouldn't do with all the guns I already own? This is like I'd only attack somebody with a new knife, not with an old one? That doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah, let's talk about Kentucky. Savannah Maddox, who's a House representative there in Kentucky, has introduced a bill which would lower the legal age of having a concealed carry license from 21 to 18 years. She also is working on a bill to abolish gun-free zones. That would be House Bill 138. That bill would allow those with concealed carry permits to bring a concealed weapon anywhere, including government buildings, colleges, and grade schools. Uvalde, if this goes through, will never happen in Kentucky because Dad will just go in there with his concealed carry permit and take care of business.
Paul, this may be a show bill, since although the Democrat governor of Kentucky says he's 2A, he may veto this for Bloomberg bucks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, I want her to pass it, and I want the Senate to pass it, and then I want the Democrat governor to veto it. So, good. Make him show us his stripes.
Yeah. Let me see here. Shelley wants to say, says in the comments, if you are old enough to join the military, you're old enough to buy a gun.
Thank you.
Let me see here. This one's. Let me get. This is interesting. I'd never heard this one before. You can't have more than 2 handguns on you. New York City CCW permit. If you own more than 2 guns, you must have a premises permit. That's $680 cost every 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Okay, because that third gun, that's the one. So, let's talk about New Jersey, man. You want to take this one?
Sure. A federal judge put a temporary restraining order on New Jersey's new concealed carry restriction laws. New Jersey legislators closely imitated New York's approach that restricts the right to bear arms. This was a bill that Governor Phil Murphy signed into law just last month. The law abolished the state's justifiable need requirement for a carry permit. That's good. But it made it almost impossible for permit holders to then carry legally anywhere outside their homes. Last week, that legal trick earned them a temporary restraining order that blocks the bill from being enforced. That puts them in a situation where, okay, you got rid of the justifiable need, but there went all those restrictions you put in place. Is this Freedom Week in New Jersey? To quote the judge, the state may regulate conduct squarely protected by the Second Amendment only if those restrictions are supported by a historical tradition of firearms regulation. Plaintiffs have shown that defendants, meaning the state, will not be able to demonstrate a history of firearms regulation that supports any of the challenged provisions of the law. U.S. District Court Judge Renee Marie Bump. That was out of Reason.com. What lawyers have done when acting for the state, they say, yes, Judge, we'll explain all that in our next filing. That never, ever, ever comes. And some judges just aren't having it anymore. They're saying, put up or be quiet.
We'll put that in our next filing, and then we need a little more time to make that filing. Can we get a continuance? And depending on the judge,
about 5 years.
Yeah, depending on the judge, they'll keep giving them and keep giving them and keep giving them. But I think you're right. I think a lot of judges are saying, that's enough of this.
Well, what's fascinating is, and lawyer Mark Smith, which you and I met at GRPC, said when this comes to restriction of semi-automatic firearms, the U.S. Supreme Court has already ruled that there were not precedents on that. They said, we've already looked at this. There are no precedents to bar these firearms as long as they are in common use for legal purposes. They are presumed rightful for individual citizens to own. Done. You don't need historical analysis when it comes to restricting firearms. Now, some of these laws did more than that. They said, oh, you can't carry one in your car. Excuse me?
Yeah, that absolutely, because your car is so ingrained in. I don't know anybody outside of New York City. I don't know anybody that can get by in today's society without a car.
Right.
I am fortunate. I live in walking distance to my job. It's inside my house. But if I have to go back to the home office, yeah, not so much. I couldn't even get to the airport without a car to go to the home office. So, yeah, if you restrict in your car, you're restricting the Second Amendment, period. And that kind of, what, that reminds me, Pennsylvania has open carry.
Oh.
However, you cannot open carry in your car. So they don't really have open carry.
How interesting. I wonder what they were. Yeah. When you figure that out, you'll share it with me, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a while for me to figure that out. I wouldn't count on it very soon. Do you want to talk about Wyoming?
Sure. The University of Wyoming Law School just started a firearms research center. This is for Second Amendment legal academics. The FRC, Firearms Research Center, is housed at the University of Wyoming College of Law, and it's just earned faculty approval and private financial support. The center was established to bring more voices to the firearms discussion, supposedly creating a pipeline for law school graduates prepared to serve as firearms attorneys and to act as a reliable, nonpartisan resource for firearms-related information. Quote, when it comes to firearms and the Second Amendment, often it's the facts. If the facts are allowed to surface without bias, then the facts flourish on their own. They speak volumes, but not if they're not allowed to be communicated. Quoting again, in the United States, there's an ongoing debate over the Second Amendment, violence, and the relationship our country has with firearms. That's from George Muscari, the FRC director and co-founder. He's a professor at the University of Wyoming's College of Law. Quote, discussions are frequently siloed, lacking cross-disciplinary work and contributions from diverse voices. By bringing together scholars from a wide range of academic disciplines and experts from other backgrounds, the Firearms Research Center will foster a broad discourse to produce meaningful change of how firearms are understood. Close quote. What I am concerned about is, did Michael Bloomberg fund this?
Yeah, that would be my concern as well. Follow the money.
Right. A lot of people tell us to follow the science when we find out that the science often follows the money. So who paid? Hopefully it was a bunch of oil guys in Wyoming and they told Bloomberg to take a hike.
There you go. There you go. Well, we're coming right down to the bottom of the hour, man. We've got stories we're not going to be able to get to, but We'll hopefully get to them either later in the week or on the weekend show. So, Rob, before we take off out of here, man, would you please tell us about Self-Defense Gun Stories and your blog?
I host the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. 20 minutes once a week. Load us into your pocket. I'm also a co-host with Paul on his Polite Society podcast. That runs 90 minutes, also once a week. My blog is at slowfacts.wordpress.com. I try and hit that every couple of days. From there, my writing is picked up at AmmoLand. Thank you, Paul.
You betcha. On my end, I want to say come back and join us tomorrow when Rob will be back. We'll be talking with Rob again tomorrow. Thursday's still up in the air. I don't know who's going to be joining us Thursday, but I'll be here. And then Friday is Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. We're going to be going, even though most of the gun world is at SHOT Show, we're still going to be bringing you the news every day this week. So please keep coming back. And for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.